This week we're watching Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, otherwise known as Father, I Have Sinned.
Hi, readers. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Katie.
And welcome to Not Another Heroine, the book pod where we celebrate the heroines we love
and roast the ones we don't. We'll find you the best 5-star reads, the spiciest romance, and save you from the overhyped DNFs.
If it's romance, we'll read it.
Or watch it.
We like every flavor. So grab your favorite drink and get cozy. Welcome to Season 4.
Hi, readers.
You have been waiting for this episode for a while now.
I think about this movie all the goddamn time. Ever seen any other Guillermo del Toro movies?
I am so happy you asked. Yes, I have. I'm pretty sure he did The Shape of Water, which came out, I think, in 2018. Have you seen it?
I haven't.
So it's a monster romance as well. Well, this is like pseudo,
Nice.
almost monster romance. This is actual, and it has a like somewhat happy ending, which is interesting for Guillermo del Toro movies in general.
Wow. Because didn't he also do Pan's Labyrinth?
Pan's Labyrinth,
maybe?
yeah.
Okay.
That was his first big, I think. I'm no movie critic. He just does creepy, weird, cool movies. And Pan's Labyrinth was that first big one that kind of like had mass appeal, I think.
I'm pretty sure that movie gave me nightmares when I was like elementary, middle school age.
I am surprised you went back to it because this Frankenstein, I was surprised at how gory it was. The level of violence and everything was pretty ugh.
Does like gore put you off pretty immediately?
Not as it makes me sick, as a mental kind of retreat. I don't have any desire to see that. We have enough gore in real life. I don't need fake shit. So Saw movies really turn me off.
Oh my God. We're just going through, childhood nightmares. I think it was like Saw 2, maybe. I slept with the lights on for probably a solid 6 months.
Wow. That's an impactful movie.
So we just don't talk about the Saw movies. But I feel like the gore in this one, it was like gross, but I was so caught up in the other themes of it that I was like, oh, this is just the natural consequence of like the story as it like progresses. But there were moments where I was like, oh, okay, that's like a little bit much.
It's mostly medical gore, which I think that's a little bit easier to swallow than just random violence. Like when the wolves were getting their skin peeled off, that kind of,
no, thank you. I feel like there has to be some kind of message behind it, but I was not receiving the message.
There was so much going on, so many layers of messaging throughout the storyline. Granted, it's a masterpiece. It's 200 years old. So yes, I would hope that there's messaging throughout this. But it's interesting that when Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, she published it way earlier than when this movie takes place. So I think it was published in 1818. And this takes place during the Crimean War. I did research while I was doing our notes. Not that I knew anything about the Crimean War outside of historical romance before watching this movie.
Crimean War, the one from Love in the Afternoon?
Maybe 1853 to 56.
I feel like I distinctly remember him saying that he like went off to wow, okay, loop-de-loop. Sorry.
I guess some trigger warnings for anybody who hasn't seen it. So gore, obviously, lots of death in general because it does take place during a war. And then there's some pregnancy stuff going on as well right in the beginning.
Yeah. I don't know that this is necessarily a trigger warning, but I would also say that if you're in the trenches of postpartum within that first year and a half, this might be a difficult movie to watch because of the parallels with postpartum depression and the act of having a child and then having your whole world turn upside down. I have a lot. This like triggered my brain in a good way. Like I could probably, like write a doctoral thesis about all of the little like tidbits. But it does kind of mirror maybe the maternal journey in a way that some people might not want to see immediately.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the themes throughout the show or throughout the movie that kind of smacks you in the face over and over again because you see it in the beginning, and we'll kind of get into the synopsis a little bit later. But in the beginning where you deal with Victor Frankenstein and his family trauma, and then also what happens when you bring life into the world. And I think if you are currently dealing with raising a toddler, so this is not the same thing, but I swear to God, my frustration level raising a puppy, immediately Victor Frankenstein's frustration. Yep, I've been there.
It's super similar to raising a dog, except you don't have all those like feel good endorphins to kind of like get you through the chaos and frustration. You're like, oh, I'm just raw dogging this. Pun intended.
Katie.
Sorry. I had to.
The timing of this is suspiciously overlapped with the rise of AI and how everyone's complaining and AI is taking over and getting rid of so many jobs. We created this artificial life and it's slowly taking over things. And yet you also have people falling in love with AI relationships. And it's very once I put it in that lens, it's all of these parallels. It's very creepy.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about the AI parallelism there. That's crazy. Especially it ends up coming to kill him at the end. And
It's
then they
okay. It'll be
like,
the Matrix and we'll all end up in pods feeding
yeah.
nuclear sites.
I think about Wally all the time, but it's fine.
We're just on a depression track, is what we are.
Yeah. You've seen Wally, right? Okay. Okay.
One time only.
That's fair. It is, sad. Sad.
Yeah. Earth turns into a dumpster and you have a
Yeah.
sad little robot left by cleaning it.
I mean, is that not what we think is going to happen to Earth, though?
Can we stay positive and have hope?
That's fair. Anyway, back to Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein.
I guess my bottom line is I did enjoy this, which it's hard to get into contemporary movies or anything because either everything is just a remake, this is a remake, or it's movie number 4 in the Marvel series or 26. Who knows? I just wish this had been longer. I wish it had been written for TV with hour-long episodes so we could have more character growth and development of all of the people portrayed in here. As it stands, great movie. 2.5 hours flew by, but there was so many opportunities that they could have developed, especially the female lead, Elizabeth, way more.
Yeah. I do feel this suffers ever so slightly from kind of putting female characters on the periphery of the story, which is potentially intentional because it kind of mirrors from part 1 to part 2 of Victor Frankenstein's kind of experience with his mother dying and her being like the center of his world and then having to kind of deal with the after effects of that and the consequences on his life. So it might be intentional, but I do feel as a member of the female audience, can we get a little bit more?
I think Elizabeth was done really dirty in this movie. Like, if I disliked anything, it was her, and it's not her fault.
Interesting. What didn't you like about her, though?
It's less so about her as a character and more how her purpose in the entire movie is just to act as a foil for all of the male characters. So she either reflects similarities with Victor, or she's a counterpoint to her uncle, or she is the shining light of companionship for the creator. But she doesn't have her own kind of track. What would she do without all of these men in her life?
I didn't even think about that because doesn't she have a little bit of monologue or a paragraph that she talks about not really having like control of her life? I think it's when she's looking at the butterfly in the little container where it's a gilded cage or still a cage or whatever.
Yeah, and
But
some
I
of
get
her
what you
actions,
mean.
like her actions don't make sense sometimes. Maybe we should just kind of get into the storyline
That's fair.
and kind of progress through the plot a little bit. Do we want to talk about similar books or movies or anything?
I don't really have many because the romance in it is very horror adjacent, where it's, obsession taken too far, where it's not necessarily kind of centered on the romantic themes that we're used to in romantasy books. I feel Alchemized is probably the closest.
I didn't even think about Alchemized until you started describing all of that. And yes, 100%.
I normally stick away far, far away from the horror genre as a whole, but I think Alchemized is probably as close as I could get, but I think that's my only
I struggled to find other similar books just because like this is not what I enjoy reading. The only other close one that I was potentially considering was The Prince of Hearts, which we've done as a pick of the week. That too features a creature with an artificial heart and some like a much more stronger romance subplot there. But there's a ton of other movies that are similar to this. The first is The Count of Monte Cristo, which is also based on a book. That's total revenge, self-made man trope where he makes a new version of himself and goes out into the world and gets his own. It's phenomenal if you've never seen it. And then there's a couple BBC miniseries if you like the setting and the kind of the dark gray overtones that this movie had, which is North and South, based on a book, like all the BBC miniseries are. And then Little Dorrit, which is a Charles Dickens story as well.
This also might be totally unhinged, but I feel some of the scenes or, like, the coloring reminds me of the movie Anna Karenina. I can never say
Oh,
the
Anna Karenina,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
the movie version with Keira Knightley.
Karenina.
I just feel like the scenes, the coloring, very similar in tone, if not, totally desperate time period.
Very tragic story, but yeah, the movie, yeah, good call. I would agree.
I just see all those, like, little scenes in my head of, like, the, like, tinted gold, but then, like, the really bright greens, and then because oh my god, the costumes in this fucking
Her
Frankenstein movie.
feather headdress thing?
Oh, oh my gosh. I have seen, like, a bunch of interviews with the costume designer, Kate Hawley. She did fucking phenomenal. I watched a bunch of interviews that she did where she was talking about creating all of the dresses for Elizabeth's character, the callback to Frankenstein's bride with her final wedding dress with the wraps on the arms. And then I think the first dress that we see her in is this teal blue with these darker splotches on it, and it was supposed to be a callback to the original way that they would do X-rays and that very, potent color, violet. Oh my god, dude, I could go on and on.
Wow, I didn't even think about the callback to The Bride of Frankenstein with the wraps. I just saw that dress, I'm like, "That's a weird addition, but okay, cool."
Oh my gosh, and then she talks about the nightgown, which I feel is your most kind of similar traditional romance heroine lead when she's walking down with the candelabra and this sheer gown or whatever. And it's interesting because she wanted to intentionally make something that's kind of a callback to horror movies and, the weak, heroine that needs someone to save her. But it was interesting that it's paralleled with this moment of touching motherhood and connection and love, but it kind of turns the romance trope. Yeah, there's romantic romance, but there's also, the love that you feel for a creation, a child. Very interesting.
So I like that you're coming at this from a perspective, a parenthood perspective.
Mm.
I cannot, but I think that adds a layer of analysis and interpretation that, like, if you don't have that experience, because this whole story is about the consequences of creation, and you're living that every day.
I think just watching the trailer and seeing the scene where the lightning comes down the tunnel and then it's a tunnel, big circle in the ground, and then he has to like slide down the water slide to escape. Is that not, a metaphor for birth? Dog. Yeah.
See, I honestly don't want to think about it now.
That's fair. Like when I was watching it, I'm like, I don't know that I like this.
All right, getting into it. This story is kind of told in reverse a little bit. It starts at the end where you open on this Arctic exploration naval ship stranded in the ice. It's in the mid 1800s, and you're like, why the fuck are we in the Arctic? Why are the polar bears? Like, what's going on
Yeah.
here? And then you see this explosion in the distance, and the crew's, what the fuck was that? I thought we were the only ones out here. They go out, they find this bloodied, beaten man, rescue him, take him back to the ship, and then they're attacked by this great caped monster of a man. They eventually defeat him by shooting the ice that he's standing on and making him drown, supposedly. And then the man is taken to the captain's quarters, and he proceeds to tell the captain of the ship his story. And this man is Victor Frankenstein.
I love the fact that this got chunked into two. First is Victor's story, and then the second is the monster's story. Love it. It's like the,
Yeah.
unreliable narrator sort of thing.
I did not see that coming. So readers, it does switch about halfway through the movie where Victor tells his part, and then all of a sudden, Creature starts talking. Oh, interesting. He's who we wanted to hear from the whole time. Actually, Jacob Elordi, who plays the Creature.
Yep. 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 I was unconvinced about him, and then I watched this movie and I was like, "No, what? I fully get it. I am on board 100%."
I was not going to watch the new Wuthering Heights, and then I watched this movie.
I am
like,
now.
Oh, yep. Thanks, Jacob Elordi. Yeah, we're here
Yep.
for you.
Absolutely. My favorite, just to really like drive this home, the scene at the very end where Jacob Elordi as Frankenstein's monster is carrying Mia Goth's character down the stairs. They originally created like a body double for her that was like, 70 pounds, 60 pounds, way lighter so he could do the scene. And he's like, no, I'll just carry her. Why would I not do that? Dog.
Yeah. So, as Victor Frankenstein is like lying in this naval ship, he starts telling a story. And we start all the way back when Victor was a teenager or like 12, 13, like right on that thing. And so he is the son of a Lord Baron who also happens to be a very famous, well practiced surgeon. And this dude, he came on screen. I'm like, oh, hello, Game of Thrones. So this is
Yep.
Charles Dance. Plays a phenomenal like baddie every single time. He's trying to train his son to be like also be a doctor. Meanwhile, the mom, who is also played by Mia Goth, which is fucking weird.
Hold that in your pocket. I have a point to make later in this. The parallels here.
Victor's mom is a wealthy heiress. She is pregnant, clearly not doing well with her pregnancy. And his dad is very much hawkish and trying to control her pregnancy and her because he's after another son, because, it's about carrying on the family name and all of that nonsense. It's a very not happy family dynamic thing going on here. So fast forward, and mom and Victor are playing cards. She has a little medical emergency and then dies after giving birth. So you start off with
not
trauma right off.
before his face with a bloody hand. Fun tidbit from that, though, that it's on one side of his face, and then in one of the scenes following it, I think his father doesn't get the answer that he was expecting when he's kind of quizzing him on surgeon whatever. He slaps him with a stick on the other side of his face. So it's the duality of his experience with his parents.
Dude.
I
Okay.
up all kinds of threads about this dude. And then like it mirrors, that moment of when he's with Frankenstein's monster and he starts like whipping him because he wouldn't give the right answer. Childhood trauma for you, works in cycles. Sorry. I'm so into this movie.
Well, after this early trauma, after mom dies, there is a son, Victor's brother, who's like the charmed, beloved son. He can do no wrong in dad's eyes. And then dad dies. And then both boys are kind of split up and sent to different families to be raised. So Victor Frankenstein is the heir, so he'll be the next Baron. And he's sent to London.
I think so.
He stays in Britain,
Somewhere.
and the brother goes to Austria or Italy. That's the closure of the family kind of background for Victor. And then when we next see him again, he is doing a demonstration for a bunch of doctors in London saying, hey, you see this partially assembled corpse? I can reanimate it with electricity. Isn't that fucking cool? It's not cool. It freaks a lot of people out, and he has no buyers except for one guy who was in the audience who's like, I want me some of that. And that is Harlander, who you would recognize this guy too if you've seen Inglourious Bastards. He's kind of he's revisiting his Nazi role here a little bit.
I do love this opening scene, though, where he invites him back to his house a little bit later to kind of like convince Victor Frankenstein, like, I am invested in this shit that you're doing. I will give you whatever resources. And Victor is kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then he's like, come to my house. I'll convince you. I have something to show you. And so the first scene where he's painting the memento mori, and it's the prostitute and she's biting into a peach and it's supposed to like symbolize, everlasting life and like youth. It is so interesting when you eventually find out what happened to his character and what he's suffering through and why he is attempting to preserve his life. It's this beautiful like full circle moment of, oh, that's why he's so invested in like the vitality of youth.
But you don't see it right off the bat, and neither does Victor, because all that Harlander says is, hey, I'm going to need a favor, unspecified, sometime in the future, and I just want you to consider
He literally says that, like unspecified.
And in the meantime, just let me take some pictures of your work, and we'll call it even. And I think Victor's like, well, I'll deal with that problem when it comes up. But for now, let's do this thing. Because the other layer of complexity here is that Harlander is the uncle of Elizabeth, who is the fiance of Victor's brother. I don't know Victor's brother's name because he is unimportant. He is just a prop for the rest of the plot. So that is how they're all tied together. And that's how Harlander was able to convince Victor to listen to him in the first place. Was like, hey, I have a letter of like introduction from your brother. What?
Yeah. And then this is immediately too when we get introduced to Elizabeth's character for the first time. They're all having dinner, a meal together. And then, of course, she's sitting there beautiful in her like amazing costume with the feather headdress. And we get into this little like I don't want to say a tete-a-tete because I don't think that's the right term, but kind of like a standoff when they're talking about the war. And Elizabeth immediately kind of gets on this pedestal, talking point of, I think it's ironic that we are attempting to preserve life and we care about, our ideals as our country, but we're sending our sons off to war to die in some muddy field. And I feel like it's supposed to be more of point on motherhood that it's like we, raise these children from birth and we care about them and we keep them warm, but they're just going to die somewhere alone by themselves, stuck in the woods. And I feel like that kind of comes up in her thoughts on the monster when he's created.
This is the scene that kind of triggered me and was made me a little bit angry about this movie because this is where the plot would have benefited from more time spent on Elizabeth's engagement with Victor because they're sitting at dinner. It's supposed to be the, hey, here's my fiance and the brother and the uncle, and we're all friends. And then Elizabeth and Victor get into this debate. And then immediately the fiance and the uncle are like, oh my God, we've heard this 1,000 times. And they peace out and go have cigars. And I felt the same exact way because Elizabeth's argument is not well pieced together. She doesn't have enough dialogue to explain herself. So you get this very loose statement about, well, do ideals mean anything when war happens? Elizabeth is supposed to be intellectual and have thoughts and be an independent kind of woman, a woman ahead of her time, but there's just not enough there. It's like, oh, here, female audience, you'll relate to her. It just felt this very throwaway scene to be, oh yeah, Elizabeth's a cool chick too. And it really seemed to serve two purposes, which is show that she and Victor have this intellectual connection that is completely opposite of her connection to her uncle and her fiance. And it's to convince the audience that Elizabeth isn't like other girls. That's all I took away from this.
I'm a cool girl.
I mean, her feathers were fucking cool. I want that little headpiece.
By costumes alone. And I feel like it's kind of almost explained away a little bit by kind of a instituted sense of naivety that she was raised in a convent. And that's talked about like 3 or 4 times. They use dialogue to reiterate the fact that she's been sequestered in this convent to learn how to be a proper lady. And I feel like that's kind of the excuse that the script almost generates for why her argument might not be put together in the right way. But is that it? Is that all we have for Elizabeth as a character? She's, a loving, like, want to be mother, but that's it. That's the whole argument.
That's all we get. She's different. But Victor and Elizabeth cross paths again later on. And this is kind of the smack in the middle of the movie montage where here's some almost romance between, Elizabeth and Victor, because Victor is at the gallows. He is picking out his future corpses to harvest for his project. They're in the slums of London. And then he looks up and he sees Elizabeth in her beautiful dress. I didn't see no ladies' companion there, by the way. And she's just carrying a stack of books. And he's like, interesting. So he follows her into a church because he's like, I wonder what she's reading, because that's the first thought that comes to his mind. So he follows her into the church and he's like, oh, she's going to confess. I wonder what she's confessing to. So
I
he
love this scene, dude.
This scene got me. I became an Oscar Isaac fan because of this scene. So he pretends to be a priest and goes into a confessional and slides the little window closed. And then his voice acting here, where he pretended to be an old man, I don't know where that came from, but it was perfection.
It was raspy, a little bit aged. Oh, God. I was like, that's not the point of this scene, but interesting.
But as he's kind of, hello, my child, please confess your sins, she knows it's him in the confessional, which perfect.
Hello. I do love that she kind of strung him along, though, because when you think about it, she knew the entire time that it was him and not the actual priest. But she kind of played her card. She's like, oh, I have to, admit a sin. And he's like, oh, yeah, to adultery or lusty thoughts. And he's like, what an ego
I love
check,
this scene,
Yeah.
That's what I mean. There's these glimpses of the interaction between Elizabeth and any of these characters. And I just wanted more of that, more of her interacting with the world, because she was designed so well. There just was so many missed opportunities.
I think it's hard, too, because you only have so much screen time. And it's really kind of centered on Victor's experience, almost going into motherhood, that all of the kind of secondary characters get a once over. But it would be
Mhm.
a really intriguing, if it was told from Elizabeth's perspective that all of a sudden she's engaged to this man. Does she love him? Does she, is she indifferent to him? And then an Oscar Isaac character comes on the scene and he gets the weirder, darker parts of me. And then he has this monster child baby. And you're like, I love him. And he's like, I'm going to set him on fire. And you're like, what?
Elizabeth and Victor after this church scene, they're like, the game's up. Let's go have tea and snacks. He's like, what books did you buy? She makes him guess. He eventually opens it up and it's all books about insects. It didn't put the pieces together until I was writing our notes for this. But is that supposed to be she likes creepy things in the first place? And that's foreshadowing for her to be like, yeah, you're a sewn up corpse of a creature. I dig that because she already likes insects.
I have no idea. I didn't really understand the bug thing. The only parts that I kind of understood were her little notes about trying to find God's perfection in
Mhm.
creatures and how she can see it in bugs for some reason. I, I don't know.
This all culminates in this interaction between her and Victor in his studio surgeon room that you talked about with the butterfly before, where it's this almost confession time where she goes to him late at night. He's like, "You're here to break off your engagement and fall in love with me, right?" And she's like, "Just
No.
kidding. You're delusional." I didn't follow because we saw this
Mm.
buildup of interactions between her and Victor. I don't know why she's staying with his brother. Why?
Don't know either. And this is probably kind of a symptom or consequence of what you were mentioning about her not getting enough screen time or development to make it a really clear argument to the viewer of why she's deciding to not be with him. But it kind of feels like one of those the right thing to do moments.
Mhm.
And if you kind of take that as the blueprint that even though she wanted to do a certain thing, she's like, this is the right thing to do. This is wrong. This is going against whatever, and then apply that to her perception with the monster, kind of makes sense. But I agree. It was kind of like, oh, they like each other, but she's ignoring that. Does she still have feelings for him? Does she love her betrothed? I'm not really clear.
Looking at all of the pros and cons list, Victor Frankenstein is the heir. Like, he's the baron. She
Mm.
has her own money through her uncle in her own right. So why does she feel she has to marry the brother? Again, we just need the miniseries. But this is also the tipping point where the story kind of lurches into the focus on the creation of Victor's monster, creature, whatever, because you get Victor's narration at this point here too, where he's like, I had never felt love for another human before. I'd never felt this level of obsession outside of my work. And it made me wonder, okay, well, if Elizabeth had said yes, would he have even felt the need to finish his creation at all? Is it supposed to be these two parallel desires within Victor and one eventually overtakes the
I didn't think about that. I don't know that I like that. Thank you, Jordan.
but why?
Well, I guess it's true because I think even in the dialogue he says that uh he was distracted by her, but then all distractions end, and then he became ultra obsessed with the so I almost feel like there wouldn't be a story if love had succeeded in a way, if romantic romance had been kind of the overarching theme, it would have ended there and then the creation wouldn't have even happened.
Oh no, the story would have sucked had it ended there.
You're like,
That's
I
not what.
don't like this.
Is that supposed to be the point where he wouldn't have
Mm.
been able to create had he been completely happy and satisfied with what he already has? It's
Mhm.
like two obsessions and one's going to take over. Anyway, we know which one takes over because then he goes out to his mad scientist laboratory, which is creepy but very cool. It's this old aquifer. I forget what they used for field.
Stormwater,
Yeah,
water.
field irrigation.
Yeah. I don't know
Anyway,
what it is. It's a giant tower in the middle of nowhere.
they turn it into a laboratory. They go out to a battlefield and scavenge corpses.
Full circle moment though when you think about Elizabeth's dialogue at the dinner table where she was, we send them out to die in bloody fields and muddy fields or whatever, and then he goes there to harvest the bits for the monster. Whoa.
There's so many good layers of intricacy here.
Hmm.
He eventually creates this thing. He's on the brink of success. He just needs one solid lightning strike. So he runs off to Harlander to be like, "Hey man, it's happening. You want to come watch?" And Harlander He stumbles on him, and this is where you discover that Harlander has syphilis and he's dying, and he wants this creature to be his new body.
Yikes. And don't love that.
Victor is not about that life, and they proceed to get into a fight when Victor's like, that's a bad idea. Let's say no for now, and then we'll talk after this. Then Harlander gets a little mad, and then they have a little scuffle, and then Harlander falls down a tunnel of doom and gets his head crushed in.
I did not need the scene where, Victor like lifts him up slightly and you can see that all of his skull is missing. Dog, I did not need to. Oh, yeah, it's gross.
This is
in
also
the sound effects too.
No, this is the start of Victor's downfall, though, where you see him like edge from almost normal human, just with a huge passion for weird shit, to he is kind of turning into a bad human because he successfully creates this thing. Hello, Jacob. Nice to meet you. And we kind of get this montage of him trying to teach the creature. The creature never has a name, which is interesting take. I kind of enjoyed that piece of it. It's just always the monster or the creature. And eventually Elizabeth and her fiance come to visit, and things kind of take a turn for the worse, because this is where Victor is like, okay, so yeah, I made this thing. He's down there. And oh, by the way, your uncle is dead. Let's not tell Elizabeth about that, but it was the monster's fault. So the fact that he blames his creation on it's not murder. It was an accident, essentially. That's kind of where you see Victor kind of nosedive and he starts spiraling.
It is interesting too. I didn't think about it until you said the accident bit, but that kind of feels like it mirrors his experience with his father and his mother dying in childbirth. That he kind of at the beginning makes this comment on his father was like this renowned surgeon and was the best in his field, but he still wasn't able to save his mother in childbirth. And it was an accident, but he still blamed his father for like not intervening well enough. And then we get this moment where Hollander dies, and then you could have just said it was an accident, but you're like, murder. So it's interesting that he did that as a child and then did it again. He like can't accept accidents as just like interventions of divinity or whatever.
All right. Well, from our shelf to yours.
We'll see you on the next page.
This.
Hi, readers. Like what you've been hearing? Like and subscribe to us on YouTube or Patreon at Not Another Heroine to support our growing library and get access to exclusive bonus content.
Ready for the next page? We post new episodes every Monday and Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.